is the Constitution. Chapter 8, the Bill of Rights. The United States had its first elections under the new Constitution in 1789. George Washington became president, of course. The vote was unanimous. That would never happen again. The new Congress started work on March 4th, 1789. What was their first order of business? To change the Constitution. While it was being ratified, several states had demanded that a Bill of Rights be added to the Constitution. A Bill of Rights is a list guaranteeing people's basic freedoms. So the new Congress set about writing 10 amendments, changes to the Constitution. Who was chosen to write them? James Madison, the father of the Constitution. The states approved 10 of the amendments that Madison wrote. We call these 10 amendments the Bill of Rights. They list personal freedoms for all Americans, freedoms that no one can take away because the Constitution protects them. To many, the Bill of Rights is the heart of the Constitution. The First Amendment is a gold mine of liberties. It protects 5 important rights: freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom to assemble, and freedom to ask the government to correct wrongs. Freedom of religion wasn't common back in 1787. Several states had state churches. Tax money paid for them. Even people in different faiths had to pay the state taxes. In Massachusetts, only Christians were allowed to run for office. Virginia threw Baptists in jail for preaching. The First Amendment ordered states to get rid of these old religious laws. Today, many countries still tell their people what religion to follow, but in America, people can worship in any way they please, or not at all. Christians, Jews, Muslims, Buddhists, and atheists, people who do not believe in the existence of God, all share equal rights. The First Amendment says so. Freedom of speech and freedom of press means that people can voice their opinions in newspapers, speeches, books, and on TV and the internet. No one can be punished for speaking their beliefs, even if the government doesn't like what someone says. Of course, there are limits of free speech. For example, falsely yelling "Fire!" in a crowded movie theater or in your classroom is a crime. Under the British rule, American colonists were sometimes arrested for disagreeing with the king. And today, around the world, harsh governments will lock up citizens who challenge leaders. But in the United States, different points of view keep democracy strong. Can large groups also protest? The First Amendment says, yes, people can gather together in large numbers to show resistance to their leaders and laws, just as long as they protest peacefully and safely. In 1950 and 1960s, African American leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. led thousands and thousands of protests in peaceful marches. The power of the civil rights movement brought about important changes for racial justice. The Second Amendment protects the right of people to own their own arms. Arms are weapons such as guns. Why would the Constitution protect gun owners? The reason given is the Second Amendment is to keep militias, well-armed militaries, were small armies of citizen soldiers. During the Revolution, militias could quickly gather in case of attack by British soldiers. Today, there are no militias. States have National Guard troops instead. But the Second Amendment still protects the right of Americans to own guns. Millions of gun owners want to safeguard their Second Amendment right. Millions of others point to the shocking gun violence in the United States. The weapons of the 1700s were muskets and rifles. They argue that the framers of the Constitution never imagined automatic weapons being carried on city streets. They want restrictions on who can own weapons, how they can buy them, and what kind of weapons can be bought. Half of the amendments in the Bill of Rights protect people accused of crimes. They make sure that arrests and trials are fair and that the rights of the accused are protected. Americans suspected of crimes have other rights too. Let's say the police think someone is hiding stolen goods in their house. The police cannot come and do a search without a warrant, a written permission from a judge. The Eighth Amendment says that convicted criminals cannot receive cruel and unusual punishment. What does that mean? People's idea about what that have changed over time. The colonists often punished people by locking them in public stocks, sometimes for days. Beating or flogging with a whip were common too. Now these punishments seem very cruel to us. Some countries around the globe give harsh punishments. They might stone criminals to death or cut off the hands of thieves. The United States does not permit such cruel acts. Today, the debate about cruel and unusual punishment in America revolves around the death penalty. Some states still put criminals who commit the most severe crimes to death. 19 states, however, passed laws making the death penalty illegal. They believe that putting someone to death, even if it's done in the most painless way possible, is always cruel and unusual punishment. The Bill of Rights was the first major addition to the Constitution, but certainly not the last.